The machine that was keeping me alive had just beeped for the 9th time, and so had my phone on the bedside table, each unanswered call to my parents a cold echo of the silence I was drowning in. I was lying in a sterile room that smelled of antiseptic and fear, a tube feeding me oxygen because a blood clot had decided to make a home in my lung. The doctors had used words like critical and unstable, and all I could think about was how my mother's voicemail greeting sounded so cheerful. She and my father were only 25 minutes away, helping my sister move a couch into a house I had essentially paid for. I had built my entire life around being the one who held everything together, the sturdy foundation everyone else could build on without a second thought. And now, in the moment I needed a foundation myself, I was finding out that the people I'd held up didn't know how to hold me. I was the owner of a successful home care agency, a company that sends people to comfort the vulnerable and the alone, and I had never felt more alone in my entire life. So, I made another call. Not to them, not again. I called my lawyer, because I realized in that cold, sterile silence that I wasn't just being ignored, I was being given an answer to a question I had been too afraid to ask for 36 years. The only revenge a bookkeeper of the heart ever takes is accuracy. Welcome back to the inner blade, the place where the quiet truths people carry in their chest finally get spoken out loud. If you have ever been the person everyone relies on, the one nobody worries about, this story is going to hit you deep. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button so the next story finds you. My name is Kara Myers, and I'm 36. I run a home healthcare agency in the Midwest, a business I built from scratch. I started with one client and a beat-up minivan, and over a decade, I grew it into a company with over 40 caregivers. The irony of my life is a sharp one. My entire professional existence is dedicated to making sure strangers aren't abandoned when they are at their most frightened and frail. Yet, the first time I was the one in the bed, my own family left me there to handle it alone, and I didn't even see it coming. For weeks before my collapse, I had been feeling off. I was getting winded climbing the stairs at work, and there was this dull, persistent ache in my left calf that I just brushed off as a side effect of a long car ride. I was the reliable one, the one who never got sick, so I did the responsible thing. I went to my doctor. She frowned at my leg, mentioned the possibility of a blood clot, and ordered a bunch of tests. She told me to be on the lookout for chest pain or any trouble breathing. I nodded dutifully, scheduled the follow-up, and went right back to my desk. I have been labeled the steady one my entire life. My mother gave me that title when I was a little girl, and I carried it like a badge of honor for 30 years before I finally understood what it actually was. It wasn't a compliment. It was a permission slip. Permission for everyone around me to lean on me, to take from me, and to never ever ask if I was okay holding all that weight. Here's the truth my family either didn't know or simply didn't want to see. I wasn't just the emotional support beam, I was the financial one too. Not in a flashy, show-off kind of way, but in the quiet, structural way that holds up a house without anyone ever noticing the beam. I paid for my parents' spot in a very nice assisted living community, the one my mother bragged about to her friends like she'd chosen it all herself. I had made them the main beneficiaries on a life insurance policy that was large enough to matter, because if anything ever happened to me, I wanted them to be secure. I had even just agreed to front the down payment on my sister Bridget's new house, the one she and her husband could never have afforded without my help. I never asked for a thank you. I never needed a parade. I just needed to be loved, and I thought that being the one who could fix everything felt close enough to being loved that I stopped noticing the difference. Just a week before I ended up in the ER, I was on the phone with my mother. I mentioned offhandedly that I was tired and that my doctor wanted to run some more tests. She breezed past it the way she always did whenever the topic shifted from my sister or the grandkids to me. "Oh, you're the strong one, Kara," she said, her voice full of a certainty that should have been comforting. "You'll be fine. You always are." I had heard that phrase in 100 different variations my whole life, and I had always accepted it as a gift. It took a hospital bed to understand it was a door. It was my mother deciding in advance that my needs were a problem she would never have to solve because she had given me a label that meant I didn't have any. It happened on a Friday morning. I was standing in my office, a coffee in one hand and a schedule in the other, when the world tilted. It wasn't just dizziness. It was like the air had turned to soup. I couldn't pull any oxygen in. A sharp, searing pain shot through my chest, so intense that the coffee cup just fell out of my hand and shattered on the floor. The sound felt like it was coming from 1,000 miles away. My office manager, a rock-solid woman named Pam, who had been with me from the very beginning, took one look at my face and had dialed 911 before I even hit the ground. I remember the coldness of the floor against my cheek. I remember hearing Pam's steady voice on the phone, telling the operator my age and that I couldn't breathe. I remember the paramedics, the oxygen mask over my face, the lights of the ambulance. As the doors of that ambulance slammed shut, a single cold, clear thought cut through the fear and the panic. I might actually die today. The woman who was always fine. The woman who took care of everyone else. I was going to die on a Friday, and the last thing I'd done was worry about a weekend shift schedule for someone else's client. The emergency room staff moved with a frantic precision that told you everything you needed to know. There were scans and tests, a needle in my arm, doctors using words I didn't understand. Eventually, I was in the intensive care unit, and a doctor with tired, honest eyes was standing at the foot of my bed, giving it to me straight because I had asked her to. A pulmonary embolism. A blood clot had formed in my leg, broken loose, and traveled to my lung. It was a big one. She didn't sugarcoat it. She told me the next 48 hours were the most critical, that I was on powerful medication to stabilize the clot, and that my body needed to hold on. She told me that while many people do recover from this, some don't, and that I should contact my family. Lying in that bed, with the oxygen hissing in my nose and the heart monitor beeping out the rhythm of my life, I felt a deep, profound loneliness. Not because no one was there, but because I suddenly wasn't sure that they would run if I called. I called my mother. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message. "Mom, it's me. I'm in the ICU. It's serious." I waited 10 minutes, staring at the ceiling. I called my father. Same thing. 4 rings, voicemail. I left another message. I knew it was a Friday. I knew my sister was moving into the new house she wouldn't have without my money. I knew my parents had promised to help her carry boxes. But surely, a medical emergency in the ICU outranks a couch. There had to be a line, even in my family, where a crisis beats an errand. Over the next 2 hours, I called them 6 more times. Every single one rang its full count and then dropped into the endless void of their voicemail. After the 8th call, I stopped leaving messages. There was nothing left to say. Then I made the mistake of opening our family group chat. There it was, scrolling up my screen in real time. A photo of Bridget's new living room, piled high with boxes. A photo of my father, red-faced and grinning, holding up one end of that ridiculous couch. A string of laughing emojis. A message from my mother that read, "Best day ever! So proud of our girl." My name had not appeared in my family's conversation in 48 hours while I lay in an ICU. My family was having the time of their lives, and I was fighting for mine. I set the phone down. The fear I had felt was starting to curdle into something else, something much colder, a clarity I had never experienced before. My phone did buzz once that afternoon. For a brief second my heart leaped, the old habit, certain it was my mother, but it was a text from Bridget. She had clearly seen the messages I'd left in the chaos. And this is what my sister sent me while I was in intensive care. "OMG, busy with the move today, but glad you're being looked after. Rest up, talk soon. Glad you're being looked after." As if I were at a spa. As if the strangers monitoring my heart were a service I had booked for myself, and not the only people standing between me and the grave. There was one more name in my phone, my younger brother Eli. He is the baby of the family, a high school shop teacher, and he has always existed just slightly outside the central gravity of our family unit. He's not the favorite, and he's not the workhorse. He's just kind in a way the rest of us never quite managed. I almost didn't call him. I told myself he was teaching, it wasn't fair to scare him. But I was tired, and I was scared, and I was out of pride. He picked up on the second ring. "Ely, I'm in the hospital," my voice cracked. He didn't ask for logistics or details, he just said, "Which one? I'm coming right now." 40 minutes later he walked through the door of my room, still in his work clothes, sawdust in his hair, his face pale with worry. He crossed the room, took my hand in both of his, and said, "I'm here. I've got you. I'm not going anywhere." I cried then for the first time since the ambulance arrived. Not because I was scared of dying, but because for 36 years I had been the one who showed up for everyone. and I had honestly never known what it felt like to have someone show up for me. It felt like setting down a weight I had been carrying so long I had forgotten it was heavy. Eli stayed. He called the school and got a substitute. He slept in that terrible vinyl chair by my bedside, waking up every time the nurses came in just to make sure I was still breathing. By the second day, the medication was starting to work. My oxygen levels were climbing. The immediate danger was passing. I was going to live. And somewhere in that long, lucid night, I did the thing I do best. I took an honest accounting of my life. I thought about the money leaving my account every month. I thought about the life insurance policy with my parents' names on it. I thought about the down payment I had promised for my sister's house. And I thought about the 9 unanswered calls. The couch. The heart emoji. The phrase, "Glad you're being looked after." I wasn't angry. Anger is hot. This was cold. This was the moment the ledger in my soul was finally being read correctly. I asked to speak with my attending physician. I explained what I intended to do: update my will, change my beneficiaries, stop the payments. I asked her plainly, looking her in the eyes, if she could confirm in my chart that I was alert and fully capable of making my own legal and financial decisions. She looked at me for a long moment. It was the look one competent, tired woman gives another. She said yes. She offered to note it in my record and to witness the signing herself. My night nurse, a no-nonsense woman named Donna, agreed to be the second witness. When my lawyer, Joel, walked in with his briefcase, I was ready. He laid the papers out on the little tray table they had been bringing my untouched meals on. We started with the life insurance policy. My parents' names came off. In their place went Eli and a second name, a caregiver relief fund I had always wanted to start at my company, a small endowment for the home health aides who break down caring for everyone else. Next was the new will. Then, the order halting the monthly payments to my parents' assisted living community. And finally, the formal withdrawal of the down payment for Bridget's house, signed and dated before the wire could clear. The only way to ensure my family couldn't later claim I was confused, medicated, or not myself, was to make it ironclad. And that's exactly what I did. I signed my name, my own steady hand, over and over. My life, rewritten so that it finally pointed at the people who had actually shown up. My mother and sister, of course, had no idea. The silence they had granted me gave me the peace I needed to act. The storm started a few days later, with a call from my brother-in-law, Dennis. He was rattled. The bank was saying the down payment hadn't come through. The closing was in jeopardy. Did Eli know what was going on? Eli, bless him, just said he didn't know anything about my finances and that maybe they should ask me, pointing out that I was still in the hospital. Then Bridget called me directly for the first time. It was the first time my sister had actually called me since I collapsed. But she didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't mention the ICU. "Kara, hey," she said, her voice tight. "Is there some problem with the down payment? The bank says the money didn't come, and we could lose the house. Did something happen with your account? Did something happen with your account?" It was the only thing that had ever interested her. I lay in my hospital bed, 4 days after she had left me on red while I could have been dying, and I felt the last thread of something snap, cleanly, and with no pain. I said evenly, "Bridget, I called our parents 9 times from the ICU. You texted me a heart emoji and told me to rest up." There was a long silence. "What does that have to do with the house?" she said. And the honest confusion in her voice told me everything. She truly did not connect the two events. The version of me who could almost die, and the version of me who funded her life, were to her 2 entirely separate accounts. And only one of them had ever interested her. My mother started calling within the hour. Suddenly, my phone was lighting up with her name over and over, the very thing I had begged for from my ICU bed. But now it was days too late, and I felt nothing but a clean, cold clarity. I didn't pick up. If my mother wanted to have this conversation, She would have it in person, on my ground, in the room she hadn't visited, in front of the people who had seen me sign my name. I let every call ring out, the way she had let mine. The next morning they came, filing into my hospital room like a delegation. My mother led the charge, carrying a grocery store bouquet wrapped in crinkling plastic. She came in smiling, a smile so bright and practiced it was almost impressive. There was no apology in it, no fear, no shame. She had decided the way to handle this was to skip straight past the last 5 days and flood the room with cheer until we all agreed to pretend. She set the flowers on my tray table, right on top of the space where I had signed away everything. She leaned down to kiss my forehead and said, "Oh, sweetheart, you gave us such a scare, but I knew you'd pull through just fine." There it was, the sentence of my entire life, delivered with a bouquet. Then, without taking a breath, she got to what she had actually come for. "Now," she said, "Bridget tells me there is some confusion with the bank. Let's just sort that out, shall we?" I looked at my mother's bright, expectant face, and I understood that she still, even now, had no idea what was about to happen. I didn't raise my voice. I reached over and gently moved her bouquet off the tray table, setting it aside. I nodded to Joel, who stepped forward and laid a small stack of papers down where the flowers had been. Then, I told them, quietly and calmly, what I had done. I told them about the new will, the change of beneficiaries, the halting of their assisted living payments, and the withdrawal of my sister's down payment. "I called you 9 times from this bed. You came when the couch was in, so I changed everything from the bed you didn't visit." The room went completely silent. My mother's smile froze on her face, stranded there like a smile that no longer had a thought behind it. And then she came apart. The smile collapsed into a look of pure, hot fury. She stood up and accused me of being cruel. She told me I was punishing the whole family over a misunderstanding. She claimed the messages got lost and that I should have made it clearer. She called me ungrateful. "You did this to us from a hospital bed," she shrieked. "What kind of daughter sits in a hospital and plots against her own parents?" I let her finish. Then Joel spoke up, calmly confirming that everything had been executed properly. He cited my physician's documentation of my mental capacity, the witnesses, the notary. It was ironclad. My mother looked from Joel to the papers on the tray, and I saw the final painful realization dawn on her. There was no angle here, no version of the story she could talk her way into. And I said the thing I had waited 36 years to say: "You called me strong so you'd never have to show up. Well, I was strong enough to stop." Bridget finally understood that the money for her house was gone because she had left me on red. "You're taking my house," she whispered. "I'm not taking anything, Bridget," I said. "I'm just not paying for it anymore. There's a difference, even if nobody in this family ever taught us what it was. I didn't leave them with nothing. That isn't who I am." Before they left, I laid out the one path I was willing to walk. I told my parents I would consider restoring a portion of the assisted living support, but on conditions. First, they had to acknowledge out loud, in plain words, that they had left me alone when I might have died. Second, whatever this family was going to be moving forward, it had to run in both directions. I was done being a beam that held up a house I wasn't invited into. My father signed immediately, his hand shaking. My mother took the longest. But with no version of the story left to hide behind, she finally said it. "I should have come." 3 small words. They cost her more than anything she'd ever given me. It was a beginning. And at 36, with a clot dissolving in my lung and my brother asleep in a chair beside me, I decided a true beginning was enough to build on. Bridget eventually bought a smaller house with her own money, and I went home to a life I had finally rewritten to point at the people who had actually been in the room. Family isn't about who shares your blood. It's about who shows up in the room when the machines are beeping and nobody's getting anything out of it. If you've been the beam holding up a house you were never invited into, maybe Kara's story gave you a little strength tonight. Tell me in the comments who actually showed up for you when it counted. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if this story connected with you, make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. We're the place where the people who hold everyone else together finally get to be the ones who are held.